Michael sat across from Olivia, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as she spoke. Her words were carefully chosen, polished like a sales pitch. A LAT marriage gives us freedom, Michael, space to grow, but we'd still be together. He leaned back, letting the silence stretch, watching her shift uncomfortably. You mean you'd have freedom, he finally said, and I'd have, what? The privilege of waiting while you explore other options? Olivia flinched. It's not like that. Michael smiled, cold, knowing. Then tell me, Olivia, why does your rental application say single? Why is Eric your emergency contact? And why the hell have you been funneling money into a private account for months? Her face drained of color. Checkmate. But before we dive deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one. Michael had always believed he had built a solid life, a stable, comfortable existence with a wife he loved, 2 kids he adored, and a career that provided well for his family. At 38, he was exactly where he had imagined himself to be, working as a senior project manager in construction, a career he had carved out through years of hard work, long hours, and sheer perseverance. He took pride in what he had accomplished, not just in his career but in his role as a husband and father. His wife, Olivia, was just as ambitious in her field. At 35, she had climbed the corporate ladder in marketing, her sharp mind and relentless work ethic making her a respected name in her industry. Together, they were the definition of a power couple, admired by friends and family for how seamlessly they seemed to balance demanding careers with raising 2 beautiful children. Ethan, their energetic 8-year-old son, and Chloe, their sweet, curious 6-year-old daughter. Their home in Dallas was everything they had worked for, a picturesque suburban house with a backyard where the kids played and where Michael often fired up the grill for weekend barbecues. They had financial security, a supportive circle of friends, and from the outside looking in, they were living the American dream. But perfection, Michael would soon learn, was a fragile illusion. It started subtly. Olivia, once someone who used to vent about the tedium of her job, had suddenly developed a renewed passion for work. At first, he was happy for her, excited even. She seemed more engaged, more lively, as if she had found some new motivation. But then the shift became noticeable in ways that didn't sit right with him. She spent more time at the office, staying late for meetings that never seemed to end. Her phone, which she had once left carelessly around the house, was now always within her reach, screen tilted away when he passed by. The biggest red flag, though, was the name that started popping up in almost every conversation: Eric. At first it was casual. Eric had the best insight in the meeting today, or Eric really knows how to bring a team together. Michael didn't think much of it. He knew Olivia worked with a lot of people, and collaboration was part of her job. But as the weeks went on, Eric's name became a staple in their conversations. It was always Eric this and Eric that, and Olivia's admiration for him seemed to grow with every passing day. One evening, while they were having dinner, Michael, in an attempt to make light of it, smirked and said, "Damn, sounds like Eric is your work husband." He expected a laugh, maybe a roll of the eyes, a playful shove of the shoulder. Instead, Olivia froze, just for a split second, but long enough for Michael to notice. Then, with a forced chuckle, she waved him off. "Oh, stop. He's just a great mentor." That was the first moment Michael truly felt something was wrong. It wasn't just her reaction, but the way she said it, as if she had rehearsed the line in her head. He brushed it off at first, not wanting to seem paranoid. After all, they had been together for over a decade. What reason did he have to doubt her? But something in his gut, something deep and instinctual, told him that he wasn't just imagining things. He started paying closer attention. The late nights at work became more frequent. The casual mentions of Eric turned into more personal details. His background, his leadership style, even his hobbies. When Michael asked if she wanted to invite coworkers over for a get-together, Olivia quickly dismissed the idea, saying they were all too busy. The Olivia he had known for years, the woman who used to scoff at corporate jargon and laugh at the absurdity of office politics, was suddenly hanging on every word this man said. He told himself he was overthinking it, that maybe Olivia had just found a mentor she admired, someone who inspired her to push harder in her career. But then he noticed the way she had started dressing differently. Subtly at first, a little more effort in her appearance, a new perfume he had never smelled before, gym visits that extended into long hours of unwinding after work. It was small things, details that didn't amount to hard evidence but painted a picture that he couldn't ignore. Something was changing, and for the first time in his marriage, Michael felt like an outsider looking in. Michael was halfway through scrolling on his phone when Olivia walked into the living room with an expression that immediately put him on edge. There was a hesitation in her stance, like she had been rehearsing something and was working up the nerve to say it. He looked up from his phone, noting the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, one of her nervous tells. "Everything okay?" he asked, setting his phone aside. "Kids good? Your parents?" Olivia exhaled as if she had just decided this was the moment. Yeah, everyone's fine," she said, shifting her weight. I need to talk to you about something." Something about her tone made his stomach tighten. He nodded, sitting up straighter, giving her his full attention. "All right, what's up?" She sat down across from him, rubbing her hands together like she was mentally bracing herself. "I've been thinking about our marriage, about us, and I think we should try something different." A cold unease crept up his spine, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Different how?" She took a deep breath. "I think we should try a LAT marriage." For a second, he thought he had misheard her. "A what?" "Living apart together," she clarified, as if that explained everything. When he didn't respond, she continued, speaking faster now, like she needed to get it all out before he could stop her. "It's a modern, progressive way of doing marriage. We'd still be together, still be married, but we'd have our own places. It gives couples space to grow individually while still maintaining the relationship." Michael stared at her, completely blindsided. He let the words settle, trying to wrap his head around what she had just said. "You want to live separately, while still being married?" She nodded. "Yes, it's actually really common in Europe. A lot of couples do it." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "We don't live in Europe, Olivia. We live in Dallas, and we have 2 kids." "I know," she said quickly, "and this doesn't change that. We'd still co-parent, still spend time as a family, but this would give us both more freedom." Michael's jaw clenched. "Freedom from what?" She hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. "From the monotony, from the routine, from feeling stuck." "Stuck?" His voice came out sharper than he intended. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. "Michael, this isn't about you doing anything wrong. I just think this could be good for us. Give us both room to focus on ourselves without all the little daily pressures that build up." His mind was spinning. This wasn't coming from nowhere, no matter how she tried to frame it. "Where is this coming from?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. She hesitated again, then sighed. "Clara and I have been talking a lot about it. She introduced me to the idea." Of course, Clara, the woman who had been divorced 3 times and somehow thought that made her qualified to give marriage advice. Michael scoffed. "So Clara, who can't keep a marriage together for more than 5 years, told you this is the key to a happy marriage, and you just ran with it?" Olivia frowned. "That's not fair." "What's not fair is you blindsiding me with this nonsense," he shot back. "Where the hell is this coming from, Olivia? We haven't even had a big fight. We have a good life. We have a family. Why are you suddenly acting like we need to reinvent marriage?" She shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his gaze. "It's just something I think would help us. It's not like I'm saying we'd be separating." Michael let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Except that's exactly what it sounds like." Michael forced himself to stay calm, nodding as if he were actually considering Olivia's absurd proposal. His heart was pounding, but he knew that if he reacted too strongly now, she'd just shut down, spin things, and make him out to be the unreasonable one. He needed more information. So he played along. He asked questions. "All right," he said, his voice measured. "Let's say we do this. Where are you thinking of moving?" Olivia's face lit up slightly, as if she had been expecting a bigger fight and was relieved he seemed to be considering it. "I've been looking at places near downtown," she said casually. "There's this complex called Skyline Lofts. It's got really nice units, modern, great views, a gym." Michael filed that away immediately. Skyline Lofts. The name sounded familiar, but he didn't react. "Sounds pricey," he said instead. She hesitated just a fraction of a second before responding. "It's not cheap, but I think it would be a good environment, you know? A fresh start in a nice place." He nodded, keeping his expression neutral, but alarms were already blaring in his head. A fresh start. Not our fresh start, but her fresh start. And why the hell was she looking at a one-bedroom apartment? Where exactly were the kids supposed to sleep when it was her turn for custody? He didn't ask that yet. Instead, he simply said, "Skyline Lofts, huh? Sounds fancy." She smiled slightly, taking his response as some kind of approval. "It is. It's got all these great amenities and the area is really nice." Michael had lived in Dallas long enough to know exactly what kind of area it was. Skyline Lofts wasn't anywhere near their kids' school. It wasn't even close to any family-friendly parks. It was a high-rise complex meant for young professionals, single people, and couples without kids. There was nothing about that place that made sense for a mother planning to have 2 young children staying with her. The next morning, after Olivia left for work, Michael sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel, running every scenario through his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just looking for space, she was looking for a way out. But if she was really done with their marriage, why not just come out and say it? Why go through this whole performance about staying married while living apart? That's when it hit him. She didn't just want space, she wanted something, or someone, waiting for her on the other side. His jaw tightened, and a wave of cold rage settled in his chest. He needed answers. So he started digging. He began with a simple Google search, looking up Skyline Lofts to see what made the place so special. It took him less than 5 minutes to confirm what he had already suspected. This was not a place where parents moved in to raise children. It was sleek, modern, filled with amenities meant for young professionals who enjoyed rooftop bars and late-night socializing. Still, that wasn't enough. He needed something concrete. He decided to call in a favor. His old friend Jacob, a guy he had worked with years ago, had a sister who worked in real estate. More importantly, she worked with high-end properties, including Skyline Lofts. He shot Jacob a text, keeping it vague. "Hey man, need some info on Skyline Lofts. Think you can ask your sister if she knows anything about who lives there?" It didn't take long for Jacob to reply. "Yeah, I got you. Give me a second." Michael's pulse was steady, but his grip on the phone was tight. He stared at the screen, waiting. When Jacob finally responded, the words sent ice through his veins. "Dude, you're not gonna like this. You know a guy named Eric?" Michael felt his stomach drop. "Yeah, Olivia's boss. Why?" "He lives there. Just renewed his lease last month." Michael exhaled slowly, his free hand curling into a fist. He closed his eyes for a second, forcing himself to breathe. He had suspected it, but seeing it confirmed in black and white made something snap into place. Olivia wasn't looking for growth or independence. She wasn't planning a fresh start for their family. She was setting up her escape, moving herself into her boss's orbit under the guise of a modern marriage arrangement. He didn't respond right away. He sat in silence, staring out the windshield of his truck, watching the world move outside while his own reality shifted beneath him. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed again. "You good?" Michael inhaled sharply before typing back, "Yeah, thanks, man." He wasn't good, not even close. But now, at least, he knew what he was dealing with, and he wasn't about to let Olivia rewrite their marriage on her terms while keeping him in the dark. If she thought she could manipulate him into agreeing to a setup that let her have her cake and eat it too, she had another thing coming. He wasn't going to confront her yet. No, that would be too easy. Instead, he was going to do what he did best. Plan, strategize, and make damn sure that when the truth finally came out, she'd have nowhere left to hide. Michael woke up early the next morning, his mind already racing through every detail of his plan. He had spent the night going over everything, making notes, laying out facts, and ensuring that when he confronted Olivia, she wouldn't be able to wriggle out of it with vague excuses or emotional manipulation. He wasn't going to accuse her outright. No, that would give her the opportunity to play the victim. Instead, he was going to let the weight of reality crush whatever fantasy she had built in her head. He made coffee like usual, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, a notebook beside him, and a neatly organized spreadsheet pulled up on the screen. When Olivia finally walked in, still in her robe, her hair damp from a shower, she barely spared him a glance before reaching for the coffee pot. He waited until she sat down before speaking. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said evenly, taking a sip of his coffee. She looked up at him, her expression cautious but intrigued. "Yeah?" Yeah, if we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it, so I started working out the logistics. He gestured to the laptop, turning it slightly so she could see the screen. There's a lot to figure out. Who's paying for the second apartment? Are we splitting the mortgage, or am I covering that while you take on the new place? What's the custody schedule going to look like? Do we do week on, week off, or are you thinking of something else? Olivia blinked, her fingers tightening slightly around her coffee mug. I figured we'd just play it by ear, she said after a moment. Michael nodded, jotting something down in his notebook. Right, but we should have something in place up front, so the kids have stability. And speaking of that, I looked into Skyline Lofts. He kept his tone casual, as if he were simply making conversation. It's pretty pricey for a one-bedroom. How were you planning to handle that? I mean, are you covering that on your own, or were you expecting me to help with any of it? The color in Olivia's face shifted slightly. I wasn't expecting you to, she started, but Michael cut her off smoothly. Good, because I ran the numbers. He tapped on the spreadsheet. Between the mortgage here, utilities, school costs, groceries, and everything else, adding another full set of expenses for a second household is going to get expensive fast. I calculated your salary, my salary, and what we each contribute now, and if you're planning to take on a high-end apartment on your own, it's going to stretch you thin. So I was thinking, if this is really about space and growth, why not look at a more affordable option? Olivia's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She hadn't expected him to take it this seriously, to break it down into hard numbers. Michael leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. And then there's the legal side of things. We should probably get everything documented just so there's no confusion later. Custody arrangements, financial responsibilities. I talked to my cousin Rachel last night. She's a family lawyer. She'd be able to help us get things set up properly. The second he mentioned lawyers, Olivia's entire demeanor shifted. Her face went pale and she quickly shook her head. Michael, there's no need to bring lawyers into this. I was thinking we could just figure it out ourselves, keep things simple. Michael tilted his head slightly, watching her reaction. Simple? You want to move out, completely change our marriage, and split time with our kids, but you don't want to make it official? Olivia forced a laugh, but it came out thin. It's not like we're divorcing, Michael. This is just about giving each other space. Michael let the silence hang between them, watching the way she fidgeted under his gaze. Then why do I get the feeling this has nothing to do with space? He said quietly. For the first time, Olivier looked genuinely nervous. What's that supposed to mean? He held her gaze, his voice calm but sharp. It means you're asking for something that makes no sense unless there's something or someone you're not telling me about. Olivia swallowed hard, gripping her coffee mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Michael could almost see the wheels turning in her head, searching for a way to spin this in her favor, but he wasn't going to let her, not this time. Michael kept his expression neutral as Olivia stumbled through her weak justifications, but inside he was burning. He needed more. He needed undeniable proof before he confronted her. That night, after Olivia went to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from work, Michael stayed up, his laptop open, his mind racing. The next morning, he reached out to Jacob again, knowing his friend's sister had access to tenant records at Skyline Lofts. He kept the request casual, pretending to be looking at places for a coworker. A few hours later, Jacob sent him a screenshot. Michael stared at the document on his phone, his pulse hammering. There it was, clear as day. Olivia's rental application. Under marital status, she had checked the box for single, not married, not separated, single. His fingers tightened around the phone as he read further. Under emergency contact, she had listed a name that made his stomach churn. Eric Davenport. Not her husband, not even a family member. Her boss. His hands were shaking with adrenaline and rage. She wasn't just thinking about leaving, she was erasing him from her life on paper before she had even worked up the courage to tell him. He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. He couldn't lose it. Not yet. He needed more. The next step was following the money. Olivia had always been responsible when it came to their finances, but over the past few months, he had noticed a shift. Their joint account showed fewer of her usual transactions, and she had stopped contributing as much toward their household expenses. He had assumed it was because she was saving for something, maybe an expensive bag or some spa trips with Clara, but now he had a sick feeling in his gut that it was something worse. Logging into their banking app, he scrolled through her transactions, looking for anything unusual. Then he found it. Recurring transfers from their joint account into a newly created private checking account in her name. Thousands of dollars had been funneled into it over the last 4 months. He sat back, inhaling sharply. She had been moving money behind his back, preparing for something. His fingers hovered over his phone, itching to call her out right then and there, but he stopped himself. If she was doing this, she had already convinced herself she was in control. He wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. No, he was going to flip the entire situation on its head. He closed his laptop, sat in silence for a moment, and then grabbed his keys. He drove aimlessly for a while, his mind playing out every possible scenario, every possible excuse she might try to use. But there was no way out of this for her. She had lied to his face. She had planned an entire new life while pretending to be working on their marriage. The woman he had trusted, the mother of his children, had been sneaking around like a coward, setting up an exit strategy she thought he'd be too blind to see. By the time he pulled into a parking lot to clear his head, his decision was made. He was done playing along. He was going to destroy whatever fantasy she had built up in her head. And when she realized she had no way to twist her way out of this, he was going to watch her fall apart. Michael wasn't sure why he called Emma that night. Maybe he needed someone to talk to who wasn't trying to manipulate him. Maybe he wanted to hear from someone who knew Olivia just as well, if not better than he did. Or maybe, deep down, he already knew that Emma had seen the warning signs too. She answered on the second ring. "Hey Michael, what's up?" Her voice was warm, familiar, but he detected hesitation, like she already sensed something was wrong. Olivia must have told her something. He exhaled, gripping the steering wheel as he sat in his parked truck outside their house. "I need to ask you something," he said, keeping his voice steady. There was a brief pause before she replied, "Okay? What's going on?" Michael hesitated, then decided there was no point in sugarcoating it. Olivia wants a living apart together marriage. She says it's for personal growth, for space, but something's off. She's looking at apartments near Eric. She's been moving money into a private account and she listed herself as single on her lease. I think she's planning something, but I don't know how deep it goes. Emma was silent for so long that Michael thought the call had dropped. Then she let out a slow breath. "Michael, I think you need to know something." His grip tightened. "I'm listening." "I wasn't sure if I should say anything," she admitted. "I didn't want to get in the middle of whatever was going on between you two, but now I feel like I'd be lying if I didn't tell you." Michael's pulse pounded in his ears. "Tell me what?" Emma sighed. "Olivia's been asking me some weird questions over the past couple of months. At first, I didn't think much of it, but now that I'm hearing all of this, it's making way too much sense." He swallowed. "What kind of questions?" Emma hesitated before listing them off. Stuff like, how soon is too soon to date after a separation? Or is it weird to date someone from work? And the one that really threw me was, how do I tell the kids I'm seeing someone new? A sharp, searing anger sliced through Michael's chest. He clenched his jaw so hard it ached, forcing himself to stay calm. "She really asked you that?" "More than once," Emma admitted. "I didn't know if she was just being hypothetical, but now I get it. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was planning for when she'd need to have that conversation." Michael closed his eyes, gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. "So this was never about space. It was never about growth. She's been setting this up for months." Emma's voice softened. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I wish I had seen it sooner. I just didn't think she'd actually go through with something like this." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head even though she couldn't see him. "Yeah, well, neither did I." There was another pause before Emma spoke again, quieter this time. "What are you going to do?" Michael's mind was already racing, piecing together his next move. Olivia thought she had been so careful, so discreet, but she had underestimated him. She thought he'd roll over, accept her version of events, let her dictate the terms of their marriage. But she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. He inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly before answering. "I'm going to let her hang herself with her own lies." Emma didn't ask what that meant. She just whispered, "Good." Michael woke up the next morning feeling strangely calm, a cold clarity settling over him. Olivia thought she was in control, that she had carefully orchestrated her little escape plan while keeping him in the dark. But now he had all the pieces, and he was going to watch her unravel. He brewed coffee as usual, keeping his movements relaxed, deliberate. Olivia wandered into the kitchen minutes later, still in her robe, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging him. She had no idea what was coming. Michael poured himself a cup, leaned against the counter, and took a slow sip. Then, in the most casual voice he could muster, he said, "Hey, quick question. Should I cancel the Florida trip or just change the ticket name?" The effect was immediate. Olivia froze mid-sip, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. She blinked at him, her lips parting slightly as if she hadn't heard him right. "What? What Florida trip?" Michael let the silence stretch just a little too long before answering. "The one I booked for us. 7 days in Miami, beachfront hotel, spa package, fancy dinners, all the works. You know, our anniversary trip." He watched her face closely. "The one I planned before you dropped the LAT bomb on me." For a fleeting second, pure excitement flickered in her eyes, like she had just been handed a golden ticket. Then, just as quickly, reality slammed back into her, and he saw the war behind her eyes, hope colliding with panic. You booked a trip," she said weakly. Michael nodded, feigning indifference. "Yeah, and since we're apparently redefining marriage now, I figured you might want to take someone else instead." He took another slow sip, then added with a smirk, "Oh, don't worry, I already made your ticket transferable. Maybe Eric would like a beach vacation." Her face went ghost white. For the first time since this whole mess started, Olivia looked truly terrified. "Michael, why would you say that?" Her voice was unsteady, but he caught the undercurrent of something else: guilt. Michael set his cup down, watching her squirm like a bug under a magnifying glass. "Why wouldn't I? You're moving into his apartment building, aren't you?" Her breath hitched, her hands tightening around the mug. "It's not—" "Spare me," he cut her off smoothly. "I know, Olivia. I know about the rental application. I know you listed yourself as single. I know you put Eric as your emergency contact instead of me. I know about the private bank account you've been funneling money into. And now I know that while I was planning a surprise anniversary trip, you were planning your exit." She stared at him, completely speechless. He had never seen her at a loss for words before. She had always been good at spinning things, controlling the narrative. But not this time. "Michael," he held up a hand, cutting her off. "Save it." He grabbed his coffee and walked past her, heading toward the door. "I just wanted to see your reaction." She turned, her voice suddenly desperate. "Wait, can we talk about this?" Michael glanced back at her, his expression blank. "What's there to talk about? You've been making your plans for months, Olivia. Now I'm making mine." And with that, he walked out, leaving her standing in the kitchen, completely shattered. Michael didn't waste any time. He knew Olivia would try to regain control, spin the narrative, gaslight him into doubting what he had already confirmed. But this time, he was ahead of her. He gathered everything: the rental application where she claimed to be single, the bank statements showing her secret transfers, and the messages between her and Eric that he had managed to retrieve from their shared iPad. Then, with the precision of a man who had already lost all patience, he sent everything to Olivia's parents. It wasn't just a blind act of revenge. He knew her parents, especially her father, had always prided themselves on family, loyalty, and integrity. He also knew they adored Ethan and Chloe, and if they saw proof that Olivia was planning to abandon her marriage and throw her children's stability into chaos for the sake of some office fling, they wouldn't stand by her. Hours later, his phone buzzed. It was Olivia's father. "We need to talk. Come over tonight." Michael had expected this. What he hadn't expected was the cold steel in the older man's voice. When he arrived at their house, Olivia was already there, sitting stiffly at the dining table, her face pale, her hands clasped in her lap. Her mother sat across from her, eyes red and swollen, looking like she had been crying for hours. Her father stood behind her, arms crossed, his jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with unspoken accusations. Michael took a seat, setting down a folder containing hard copies of everything. He didn't need to say much. The proof was already laid out. Her father picked up the rental application, his eyes scanning the section where she had checked single. His grip on the paper tightened. "Explain this," he said. his voice dangerously low. Olivia swallowed hard, her face crumbling under his gaze. "Dad, He slammed the paper down on the table, making her mother flinch. "No," he snapped. "No more lies, no more excuses. We raised you better than this, Olivia. What the hell were you thinking?" Tears welled up in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to." "You didn't mean for what?" Her father's voice was sharp. "You didn't mean to deceive your husband, your kids? To lie to all of us while you planned to run off with another man?" Her mother let out a quiet sob, burying her face in her hands. "Olivia, how could you?" Michael sat back, arms crossed, watching Olivia fall apart under the weight of her own betrayal. He didn't feel satisfaction, just a cold detachment. Then came the final blow. Her father turned to her, his expression void of emotion, just pure disappointment and disgust. "You're no daughter of mine." Olivia's breath hitched, her entire body trembling. "Dad, please." He shook his head. "No. You betrayed your family, you betrayed your children. I can't even look at you right now." Her mother sobbed harder, her entire body shaking. Olivia reached out for her, but she flinched away. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Michael pushed his chair back and stood up, adjusting his sleeves as he stared down at the woman he had once trusted more than anyone. "This is the part where you realize," he said quietly, "that you didn't just lose me, you lost everything." And then he walked out, leaving her to drown in the wreckage she created. Michael wasted no time. The morning after the family meeting, he called his cousin Rachel, the family lawyer, and got the divorce process rolling. He had every piece of evidence needed to secure primary custody of Ethan and Chloe, from Olivia's rental application listing her as single to the bank statements proving she had been funneling money into a private account. Rachel assured him that with this level of documented betrayal and attempted abandonment, Olivia's position in court would be laughable. A few days later, Olivia attempted damage control, sending carefully worded texts filled with half apologies and manipulative reasoning. "Michael, I never wanted to hurt you. I just got lost in my own head. Can we talk? Can we find a way to fix this?" He didn't respond. Instead, he forwarded every message to Rachel, ensuring that any attempt Olivia made to spin the story in her favor would be legally countered. When the custody battle officially began, Olivia fought. At least she tried. She sat in the courtroom, dressed in neutral tones, playing the remorseful wife, insisting that she deserved joint custody and that this was all a misunderstanding. But then Rachel presented everything. The judge took one look at the financial transfers, the rental application, the emergency contact change, and the blatantly damning text messages, and ruled in Michael's favor almost instantly. Olivia would get supervised visitation only until she could prove she was a stable and fit mother. No overnight stays. No taking the kids out of state. And just to make things worse for her, the court ordered that she was not allowed to introduce them to any new romantic partners without prior approval. The moment the ruling was read, Olivia burst into tears, pleading with the judge, but the damage was done. She had built a fantasy where she could keep her family as a backup plan while pursuing something new on the side. She had never expected to lose it all in one fell swoop. But karma wasn't finished with her yet. While Olivia was busy scrambling to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, Michael received a deliciously ironic update. Eric's serious girlfriend had found out everything, and she wasn't the type to go quietly. It started with a scene at their office. According to one of Olivia's co-workers who had no loyalty to her and was more than happy to spill the gossip, Eric's girlfriend had walked into the office with printed screenshots of Olivia and Eric's messages, emails, and photos. She slammed them down on the receptionist's desk, demanding to see HR immediately. The fallout was instant and brutal. By the end of the day, both Olivia and Eric were fired. Michael didn't need to gloat. The universe had already taken care of it. Olivia, who had once lived in a beautiful home with a loving family, now had nothing. She had drained her secret savings account trying to cover her new apartment and legal fees, only to end up with no job, no money, and no future with Eric. He had ghosted her the second they were both fired, leaving her completely alone in the wreckage of her own choices. Michael, on the other hand, had everything. He kept the house, the kids, full financial control, and his dignity intact. His only regret? That he had wasted so many years on someone who never truly valued what they had. As he stood in his kitchen that evening, watching Ethan and Chloe play in the living room, A realization settled over him. He wasn't the one who lost. Olivia was. And for the first time in months, he felt completely at peace. Michael hadn't planned on leaning on Emma, but she had been there from the moment everything fell apart. She had been the one checking in, making sure he was eating, helping with the kids when things got overwhelming, showing up at soccer games and parent-teacher meetings when Olivia was too busy destroying her own life to care. At first, their time together felt like nothing more than two people picking up the pieces left behind by someone else's recklessness. She helped him adjust to being a full-time single parent, and he provided her with a sense of stability she had been missing since her own divorce. It was easy, natural. There were no awkward expectations, no forced conversations, just comfort in the presence of someone who actually gave a damn. One evening, after getting the kids settled in bed, they sat on the back porch with glasses of wine, the warm Texas air wrapping around them. The conversation drifted, light and familiar, until Emma chuckled softly, shaking her head. "I still can't believe you planned a whole Florida trip for her," she said, taking a sip from her glass. Michael smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, well, turns out I was the only one actually invested in our marriage." She tilted her head, watching him carefully. "Do you regret it?" He thought about that for a moment. He had spent so much time being angry, feeling betrayed, questioning everything, but now, looking at where he stood, he realized something. He was better off. He had his kids, his home, and his peace of mind. Olivia was the one drowning. "No," he said finally, "because if I hadn't planned that trip, I wouldn't have had the perfect way to watch her self-destruct." Emma laughed, shaking her head. "You really did play that perfectly." He turned to her, his eyes catching hers in the dim porch light. "I didn't plan any of this, but maybe it all worked out the way it was supposed to." There was a pause, a shift in the air between them. Emma set her glass down and exhaled. "You know, Olivia always thought I had a thing for you," she admitted with a small smile. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Did she?" Emma nodded. "She used to get paranoid about it. Whenever I came over, she'd watch me like a hawk." He scoffed. "Figures. She was so busy accusing everyone else of things, she didn't notice she was the problem." Emma chuckled softly but didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned in just slightly, her gaze locked on his. It wasn't forced. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Michael met her halfway, the space between them disappearing in an instant. The kiss was slow, unhurried, a quiet confirmation of something that had been building between them for months. There were no regrets, no second thoughts. When they finally pulled apart, Emma gave him a knowing look. "The irony of this," she murmured. Michael smirked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yeah, Olivia's worst nightmare just became her reality." The best part? She had no one to blame but herself. Michael had almost forgotten what it felt like to have peace. For the first time in years, his house felt like a home, not just a place he shared with someone who had been slowly pulling away. The tension, the uncertainty, the gut-wrenching feeling that something was wrong, it was all gone. His nights were filled with laughter from Ethan and Chloe, weekend trips to the park, family movie nights where he didn't have to wonder if the person sitting next to him was secretly planning her escape. And then, weeks later, just when he thought Olivia had finally disappeared from his life for good, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He stared at the screen for a moment before realizing who it had to be. He played the voicemail, and the second he heard her voice, shaky, tearful, and filled with forced remorse, he sighed. "Michael, it's me. Please don't hang up." Olivia's voice cracked slightly, as if she had been crying. I know I messed up. I know I was selfish, and I wasn't thinking clearly, but I swear, I've changed. I see it all now. What I threw away, what I destroyed. I miss you. I miss our family. I miss..." Her breath hitched. "I miss being home." Michael closed his eyes, listening but not feeling anything. "I was lost, Michael. I let other people influence me. I made the biggest mistake of my life. But I'm different now. I've been going to therapy. I've been reflecting, and please don't shut me out completely. Can we just talk? Can we just see if we can fix this? For the kids." A long pause. Then, in a broken whisper, she added, "I still love you." Michael let out a slow, measured breath and deleted the voicemail. Then he went into his messages, found Rachel's contact, and forwarded the recording straight to her. For the custody file, A minute later, Rachel's response popped up. "You want to respond?" Michael smirked. "No need." Olivia had been so sure she could rip their marriage apart and still keep him as a backup plan. She thought she could play the field, see if the grass was greener, and then, when everything crumbled, just waltz back into his life like nothing had happened. But Michael was done being her safety net. She had been right about one thing, though. He did have plans that night. But they didn't include her. Michael put his phone away, grabbed his keys, and called out to the kids who were playing in the living room. "Hey guys, who wants ice cream?" Ethan and Chloe lit up instantly, scrambling to put on their shoes. Emma walked in from the kitchen, smiling at the sight of them. "Ice cream, huh?" she teased. Michael wrapped an arm around her waist and pressed a kiss to her temple. "Yeah, it's a special occasion." She raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" Michael grinned, watching his kids laugh as they raced each other to the car. "I just realized," he said, tightening his hold on Emma, "I finally won." The waves rolled gently against the shore as Michael walked along the beach, the warm Florida sand soft beneath his feet. The sun was setting, casting streaks of gold and crimson across the sky, reflecting off the ocean in a way that made everything feel surreal, almost like a painting. Ethan and Chloe ran ahead, their laughter carrying through the salty air as they chased the foamy edges of the tide, their little footprints disappearing as quickly as they were made. Emma walked beside him, her hand tucked comfortably in his, her presence as natural as the rhythm of the waves. She looked over at him, catching the thoughtful expression on his face. "You okay?" Michael let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "Yeah, just thinking about how much can change in a year." Emma squeezed his hand. "For the better." He nodded, looking out at the horizon. A year ago, he had thought his world was crumbling. A year ago, he had sat in his truck, trying to piece together why the woman he had built a life with was suddenly willing to throw it all away. A year ago, he had felt the sting of betrayal so deep he wasn't sure he would ever fully recover. But now, standing there with the people who actually mattered, he realized something. Olivia leaving had been the best thing that ever happened to him. She had thought she was walking away for something better, but in reality, she had freed him. Freed him from the slow poison of a loveless marriage, from the weight of constantly trying to be enough for someone who was always looking for more. He didn't lose his family. She did. He didn't lose himself. Ethan called out, waving excitedly. "Dad, look at this shell!" Michael smiled, watching his son hold up a small white seashell like it was the greatest treasure in the world. Chloe ran up beside him, clutching one of her own. "Can we take them home?" Michael bent down, ruffling her hair. "Of course we can, sweetheart." Emma crouched beside them, inspecting the shells. "They say if you put one up to your ear, you can hear the ocean." Chloe gasped and pressed hers to the side of her head, eyes wide with wonder. "I can hear it." Michael chuckled, watching the scene unfold. This was what happiness looked like. This was what family felt like. Not just surviving, not just going through the motions, but truly living. He met Emma's gaze, seeing the same realization reflected in her eyes. Olivia had been afraid of this exact moment. Afraid that he would move on, that he would find happiness without her. And she had been right. As they walked back toward the resort, the kids chatting excitedly about their shells and the ice cream they wanted to get later, Michael exhaled deeply, letting go of the last remnants of his past. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking back. He was only looking forward. Sometimes, losing someone who doesn't value you is the best thing that can happen. What would you do if your spouse suggested a LAT marriage? Let's discuss in the comments. Olivia pushes for a living apart together marriage, claiming it's about personal growth. In reality, it's just a cover for her affair with her boss, Eric. Michael plays along, but behind the scenes, he gathers evidence of her betrayal, from her rental application listing her as single to the hidden bank account she's been funneling money into. When the moment is right, he flips the script, exposing her lies in front of her parents, the court, and even Eric's serious girlfriend. The fallout is brutal. Olivia loses everything: her marriage, full custody of her kids, her job, and even the man she threw it all away for. Meanwhile, Amaya, Olivia's younger sister and Michael's biggest supporter throughout the divorce, becomes the real love story. What Olivia feared most actually happens, not because Michael planned it, but because she pushed him straight into the arms of someone who truly valued him. Now, while Olivia is left with nothing, Michael is thriving, raising his kids, living a peaceful life, and finally experiencing real love. Sometimes karma works faster than expected. Like and share if you think Michael made the right decision.